The conclave of 17 species had many unspoken rules. Do not challenge a Vorkai elder. Do not touch a Theshan's antennae. And above all, do not bring a human to the front lines of a Void Reaver incursion. Kalen had broken that last rule the moment he filed Naira's deployment papers. You submitted what? Commander Saratha's 4 eyes blinked in staggered sequence, a Vorkai expression of pure disbelief. His crest feathers, usually a proud shade of iridescent gold, had gone flat against his skull. A human? For the Outer Veil operation? Kalen, I respect your record, but this borders on negligence. Kalen stood easy, hands clasped behind his back. He was the only human officer on the unrelenting principle, and he had long since stopped being offended by the looks. Specialist Naira is the most qualified individual for this mission, sir. Her file speaks for itself. Her file says she scored in the 99th percentile for close-range engagement metrics. Sarath dropped the data slate onto the briefing table with a sharp clatter. That is a simulation. Void Reavers do not exist in simulations, Kalen. They exist in the dark between stars, and they eat things that are afraid. Yes, sir, they do. Humans are soft creatures. Atmospheric requirements. Calcium-based skeletons. You sleep. The way Sarath said the last word made it sound like a terminal illness. We do. Kalen smiled faintly. Permission to introduce you to Specialist Naira, sir. In person, she was smaller than Sarath had expected. That was the first thing. Naira stood at the entrance to the briefing room, and she was compact. Brown skin, dark eyes that moved across the room with quiet, systematic efficiency, cataloging exits and threats and distances with the calm of someone who had done it so many times it had simply become breathing. She wore standard-issue gray, no markings of pride or decoration except a single black band on her left wrist, some human custom none of them recognized. She said nothing. She simply waited. Zeth of the Pale Current, the Theshan navigator, leaned toward Kalen and whispered at a frequency he probably thought humans couldn't detect. She appears unimpressive. Naira's gaze moved to Zeth without expression. I heard that. Zeth's antennae retracted sharply. Specialist. Sarath clasped his hands behind his back, the formal posture of a commander taking measure of a subordinate. You are aware of what we face. Void Reavers. 12 confirmed, possibly more. Operating in the debris field around Kethra Station. They've taken out 2 conclave ships in the last 6 cycles. She recited it with no inflection. The station has 312 personnel still alive. We have approximately 40 hours before their life support fails. And you believe you can help us retrieve them. I know I can. The silence that followed was its own kind of statement. Vorkai did not make such claims without extensive ceremony and ritual qualification. Theshan's attached probability estimates. The Yulhari delegation in the corner made a sound that loosely translated as the arrogance of lesser creatures. Naira didn't look at any of them. She was already studying the star map on the wall. They entered the debris field at 0300. Void Reavers were not fully understood, even after decades of contact. They were not animals and not sentient in any way the Conclave recognized. They were something between, dark and patient and drawn to electromagnetic signatures the way a current is drawn downhill. The unrelenting principle had gone silent running 3 hours before approach, killing every non-essential system, moving through the field like a held breath. Naira was already gone by the time Sarath reached the forward observation bay. Where, he said, very carefully, is the human specialist? Kalen looked up from the sensor array. She deployed, sir. She deployed. Eva. 40 minutes ago. He pulled up the tracker signal on the nearest console, a single white moving through the debris field with unsettling purpose, threading between dead hulls and drifting wreckage as though the darkness itself was steering her. She said the ship's signature was too large. She's going in on foot. The bridge went very quiet. Void Reavers tracked electromagnetic output and thermal mass. A suited human, life support minimized, moving in slow, deliberate intervals, she would barely register. She would be, to a Reaver's senses, approximately nothing. A ghost. Seth was looking at the console. She has been out there for 40 minutes, and they have not detected her. No, Kalen said. The station is 1.3 kilometers through the field. Yes. She is going to walk 1.3 kilometers through 12 Void Reavers on foot. Alone. In the dark. Kalen said nothing. He watched the dot move, patient, steady, inexorable. She is insane, Zeth said, with something that had crossed the border from contempt into something closer to awe. They watched her work for 3 hours. She didn't run. That was the thing none of them expected. Every instinct, every model they had built around human behavior in crisis suggested flight response. Panic, the loud mistake. But Naira moved like something carved from the cold itself, deliberate as a tide. When a Reaver drifted close, she went motionless, sometimes for 8, 9 minutes at a stretch, crouched behind wreckage, breathing controlled to the minimum viable rhythm while a creature the size of a shuttle boat moved past her in the dark. Between the silences, she moved. She reached the station. She interfaced with the emergency systems through a hardline connection, bypassed the automated distress beacon that would have lit up the debris field like a star, and walked the survivors to the emergency bay in groups of 20, darkened, hushed, no lights, hand signals, a system she must have briefed them on through text-only comms. 312 people. 40 hours of life support remaining. She brought them out in 6 hours. On the last trip, a Reaver found her. The bridge crew saw it on thermals, the creature's vast, lightless silhouette turning, orienting. For 1 second the white dot on the screen went completely still. Then it moved. Not away. Toward it. What? Sareth began. The Reaver's thermal signature spiked. Then dispersed. The fragments drifted apart in a slow, almost peaceful spread across the screen. How? Said Zeth of the Pale Current, very quietly. How did she? Kinetic charge, Kalen said. Modified. She filed a requisition for the components 14 months ago. Listed it as personal research. He paused. I approved it. Sareth stared at the screen. At the white. Moving again, steady as ever, heading back to the ship. She planned for this. She plans for most things, sir. Kalen permitted himself a small smile. She's just quiet about it. Naira came aboard through the portside airlock, helmet under her arm. 12 hours of debris field darkness still clinging to her like a second skin. She walked through the corridor where the bridge crew had gathered without particularly acknowledging the silence that fell around her. Sareth stood in the center of the corridor. He was a large creature, old and decorated and proud, and he looked at the small human woman for a long moment. Then he lowered his crest. A full bow. The deepest expression of respect a Vorkai commander could give. Naira looked at him. You said, he told her, that you knew you could do it. Yes. You were not boasting. No. She considered for a moment. I don't really boast. I just know what I've prepared for. She walked past him toward the medical bay, 312 survivors to check on. She had not slept in 18 hours. There was still work to do. The crew parted for her automatically, and perhaps none of them could have explained exactly why. Zeth touched his own antennae, a gesture of deep private reckoning. I called her unimpressive, he said. Kalen clapped him gently on the shoulder. Yes, most people do. He watched the corridor where she had gone. Once,